Hello everyone, this is Marshall Official. Welcome back to another update on the Russo-Ukrainian war. We're going to be covering all the changes on the front line from the last several days, as well as some very important events that happened off the battlefield. We've also now entered the fourth year of this war, and also there's been a lot of big news happening off the front line. Again, I can't do it justice in this video alone. This is a battlefield, and I guess I'm going to be including some off the battlefield stuff in this video, but I would have to make a video just on stuff happening off the battlefield because it's big news. But we'll go over all that as quickly as possible. We're actually going to be starting off with something that happened in the Oval Office between President Zelensky and President Trump's meeting. So during their meeting, I'm sure you guys already saw this. This has been big news. It did not end well. The meeting did not end well. It was tense at several points, but at the end, it really just exploded. And this is the moment that it exploded right here. So President Zelensky is asking J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance just got done saying that the U.S. needs to try using diplomacy rather than just tough words to try and end the war in Ukraine. Zelensky responds saying that we tried diplomacy. We signed a ceasefire in 2019. Russia broke that ceasefire. So he's going to ask him what diplomacy do you mean, J.D. Vance? That will end. What do you mean by diplomacy? With Russia, what do you mean by that, basically?
The exchange of prisoners, but he didn't do it. What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you
Mr. President,
and this is where it starts. So JD Vance pretty much accuses him of being disrespectful, and this is what really starts it right here.
with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media. Right now, you guys are going around and forcing conscripts to the front lines because you have manpower problems. You should be thanking the president for trying to bring an end to this conflict.
Have you ever been to Ukraine that you say what problems we have?
I have been to.
Come once.
I've actually watched and seen the stories, and I know what happens is you bring them on a propaganda tour, Mr. President. Do you disagree that you've had problems?
Okay, I disagree for now. I don't honestly God know what the heck he's talking about. This is what the fight starts. But if I'm being honest, I don't think JD Vance had any point in saying any of this. Like, it doesn't make any. I really don't know what the heck he's talking about, and he's basically accusing President Zelensky of being disrespectful to the Oval Office, and then he says, he's forcing men to the front line. Obviously, in a war, you do that. You can't in a major war. If it's a smaller war, maybe not, but a major war where in a major war like this, you're expected that if you have to, which you almost always are, to conscript men. That's nothing unusual in a major war. But anyways, J.D. Vance starts the fight, basically. This is when the fight starts. J.D. Vance starts it, and then Trump is actually dead silent. Like, he doesn't say anything for about a minute. But once he's going to say something, that's going to set Trump off.
Bringing people into your military? And do you think that it's respectful to come to the Oval Office of the United States of America and attack the administration that is trying to prevent the destruction of your country?
A lot of questions. Let's start from the beginning.
Sure.
First of all, during the war, everybody has problems, even you. But you have.
And this is what sets Trump off. But he's not wrong. Zelensky's not wrong for saying this. He's not wrong for saying that. Yes, if you're in a war, you're going to have problems. Either side, winner or loser, there's going to be some level of problems. There's going to be something's not going to go right. Obviously, when you're fighting a full-scale war, Zelensky's 100% right on that. He's basically saying that we're in a war. We're going to have problems. There's just no getting around that. And manpower issues are one of our problems, and so to solve that, we have to conscript men. He doesn't say it directly, but that's what he's saying. We have a problem, we have to solve it because we're in a full-scale war. And then now he's going to say what he's about to say is he's going to say the U.S. is going to also hurt and have problems because of Russia, is what he's basically saying. And Trump doesn't like that. Trump's not going to like that at all.
Nice ocean, and don't feel now, but you will feel it in the future. God bless.
You don't know that.
God bless. God bless. You will not have a war.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that.
That's exactly what you're doing.
You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel. We're going to feel very good.
You will feel influence.
We're going to feel very good and very strong.
You will feel influence.
You're right now not in a very good position. You've allowed
From the
yourself
very-
to be in a
from
very
the
bad
very
position,
beginning
and he
of the
happens
war.
to be right about
From the
it.
very beginning of the war.
You're not
Mr.
in a
Brown,
good position.
I
You don't
was
have the
saying-
cards right now. With us, you start having
Not playing
cards.
cards.
Right now, you
I'm
don't.
very
You're playing
serious,
cards.
Mr. President.
You're
I'm
playing
very
cards.
serious.
You're
I'm
gambling
the
with the
president
lives
in
of
war.
millions of people.
You think-
You're gambling with World War
What do you-
III.
what do you
You're
speak about?
gambling with
What do you
World
speak
War
about?
III. And
You-
what you're
I
doing.
can't hear what Zelensky's saying, but I can't. We can't really tell what he's saying. He says,
Serious.
You're
I'm
gambling with the
president
lives
in
of
war.
millions of people.
You think-
You're gambling with World War
What do you-
III.
what do you
You're
speak about?
gambling with
What do you
World
speak
War
about?
III. And
You-
what you're
I think he's saying, "What are you thinking about?" I'm not sure. I'm not sure, quite sure what he's trying to say there. I think he's saying, "What are you thinking about?" In other words, Zelensky wasn't just going to sit there and be talked to like that. In other words, Zelensky was going to stand up to Trump, and basically what he said was to set Trump off was, "You're going to feel the hurt of Russia winning this war," and then Trump didn't like that at all. Trump was dead silent for like the whole first minute of the fight, but once Zelensky said that, he was like, "Nah." That's what started the fight right there.
doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country.
I'm
That's
with
back
all
to you.
respect to your
Far
country.
more than a lot of people said
very
they
respect.
should have.
Have you said thank you once this
A lot
entire
of
meeting?
times.
No, in this
Even
entire meeting,
today.
have you said thank
Even
you?
today.
You went to Pennsylvania and campaigned for the opposition in October. Offer some words of appreciation for the United States
are
of
you
America
speaking about?
and the president who's trying to save your country.
Please, you think that if you will speak very loudly about the war, you
He's
can
not speaking loudly.
Okay, we're not going to watch the whole thing. There's no real point. I'm sure you've already seen the entire thing before, but there are certain important parts, like this part, like Trump, puts his hand on Zelensky. With a lot of people said he shouldn't have done that.
You
And you
voted
men
for
are
your
brave,
president.
but they had to use our military.
What about West?
If you didn't have
You
our
invited
military
me-
equipment,
you invited
if
me
you
to
didn't
speak.
have our military equipment, this war would have been over in 2 weeks.
In 3
okay?
days, I heard it from Putin. In 3 days, this is something
Maybe
new.
less.
In 2 weeks, of course,
It's
yes.
going to be a very hard thing to do business like this. I
Again,
tell you.
just say thank you.
I said a lot of times thank you to American people.
Accept that there are disagreements, and let's go litigate those disagreements rather.
After this meeting, they were going to have lunch, first of all, and then they were supposedly going to sign the mineral agreement. That did not end up happening. Recent news suggests that they either already have signed one. Recent news suggests that Zelensky has agreed that he will sign a mineral agreement with Trump. At this time, he said no, he didn't want to sign it, and Trump didn't like that, obviously. So the fight pretty much started over an argument about diplomacy and the use of diplomacy, and it was started by JD fans. And then Zelensky set Trump off by telling him that the U.S. was going to be hurting because of the war in Ukraine, basically, and Trump didn't like that. And then it just evolved from there. It was a bad look for both sides, really. Other major news here: Donald Trump cut off all military aid to Ukraine. And initially they said that they were going to cut off military aid, and then they were going to keep allowing intelligence to be given to Ukraine. That has not happened. That has, however, been turned down today. They turned back on that. The U.S. will not be giving intelligence to Ukraine or military weapons. They even told Britain. You are not allowed to give intelligence that we give you to Ukraine. So don't be forwarding any intelligence we give you to Ukraine. It is a major turning point in U.S. relations with Ukraine, and it all happened because of the Oval Office fight, basically, and that's what caused all of this. And Donald Trump has said that he will undo these decisions when Zelensky shows that he is willing to negotiate with both him and Russia to end the war in a good peace deal. Basically, that's when these decisions will be turned around. But will that happen at all? Who knows? But the point is that at this point, the USA has cut off military aid to Ukraine and intelligence. They've ordered Britain to not give intelligence to them. And I even saw on Balkan Mapping today that the USA apparently is considering giving data to Russia, actually. So that's absolutely a major development. There has been other developments as well. The Russia has offered the USA deals to come into the occupied territory and drill for rare earth metals there. So that's a big deal. Trump showed interest in a deal like that. Belarus said they might be Belarus said, Lukashenko specifically said that they're going to start drilling for rare earth metals there, probably to get a deal from the United States to come in and drill here, or get rare earth metals from Belarus. That's very possible. And in Ukraine, again, has turned around and said that they will be open to a mineral agreement as well. So a lot of mineral stuff going on, Russia, Belarus, and Ukraine, and of course the United States. That's obviously been big. At the same time, Macron, the leader of France, has been very much so stepping up his support for Ukraine. He's stepping up military production. Specifically, he said tanks and helicopters, and he also pretty much said that Europe can no longer rely on the United States. So that's going to sum up the major developments off the battlefield from the last several days. It's a lot, and there's a lot more to it. Again, I can't do it just in this video, but for that's a simplified version of what's been happening. So let's now move on to the front lines. Okay, starting up here in the Kursk region, we have several developments from this part of the front line. Russian forces have made several gains across the front line. Oh, I also want to point this out real quick. You can see I've also cleaned the map up. All those individual polygons all over the place. You can see I cleared all that up. That's part of the reason why this video took so long to come out. I had to clean up all that excess stuff or whatever, but I cleaned it all up, and so now all those polygons are gone, and the map looks a lot better now. So anyways, but up here in Kursk, the Russian forces have made several gains. Over here in the south, they've captured this forested area right here. Up here in the north, they've captured the villages of Nokilsky, and up here they've captured Orlovka and Novaya Sorochina. They've also captured two villages, or entered two villages here to the south, in Novenke and Zaravka. These villages, however, are actually in the Sumy region of Ukraine. Russian forces have crossed the border here into the Sumy region of Ukraine. This does not appear to be a major offensive or anything like that. It is likely just Russian forces, instead of pushing this way, instead of pushing this way, have instead turned south and entered Ukraine. So it doesn't seem to be a major development. This is over the last multiple days. So this is not a major offensive. Otherwise they would have pushed further down here. But there have been some reports of Russian forces reaching as far as down here. But those were just simply recon or small skirmishes, and they immediately what's called turned back and went back to their lines. So that was minor stuff. If this does turn into a possible major Russian offensive, if we start seeing Russian gains, pushing this way down here towards Unikivka, I'll of course fill in this part of the front line blue for the Ukrainian Sumy region, and I will consider this obviously a new open front. For now, Russian forces have just made little punctures into the Sumy region, and nothing major. But nevertheless, it is still worth noting that these two border villages have basically fallen under Russian control, and it's possible they might look towards a larger offensive to capture these two villages right here to cut off Ukraine's supplies to the Kursk region. Moving on from that, this is not new, but I just noticed, like literally just the other day on Syriac maps, that they still have this town labeled as being under Russian control, which I did not know of. This is not a recent development. This town has supposedly been under Russian control for a while. I just never noticed it, but I have filled it in as being under Russian control. Syriac maps has it as so. I haven't heard anything about this. I don't expect anything to come of this anytime soon, if ever. So supposedly this village is under Russian control across the border into Ukrainian territory. We do have a recent development from this part of the border area. Russian forces have pushed into the Kharkiv region over here, and they've captured a checkpoint. Nothing major, but they have captured the entire checkpoint right here, just across the border into the Kharkiv region. This was a few days ago. Moving on from that towards the Volchansk and Kharkiv front in general, we have no changes from this part of the front line. Nothing has happened here. We do have some changes from the Oskil front line / Kupiansk front line, where we have changes from both sides. Russian forces have pushed further north, capturing these tree lines in this hilly area. They've also pushed into the forested area right here, and they've also captured several tree lines down here to the south, pushing towards Kupiansk itself, and a forested area, and more of the Oskil River shoreline right here. So Russian forces have made several gains here. The Ukrainians, on the other hand, have made two gains. This is on the eastern side of the Oskil River. They have pushed the Russians back from the immediate area on the eastern side of Kupiansk. Russian forces lost control of these forested areas right here, and were pushed back into the main forest itself. and the Ukrainian forces are also able to recapture this forested area right here, which the Russian forces captured actually pretty early in their offensive. Ukrainian forces were able to recapture that, and that is the situation on this part of the front line. It is worth noting that I have noticed that the Russian forces, according to reports, are in a bit of a defensive stance. They are not. Russian forces have kind of ended their big offensives. They've been on the offensive for about a year at this point, actually over a year now. So it makes sense Russian forces are kind of taking a break, and we are now entering the springtime, which means mud, a lot of mud. So that's obviously good. So Russian forces are going to be taking a bit of a rest, basically. They're on the defensive, and Ukraine is using it as an opportunity to launch counterattacks, like you see right here. So these counterattacks like this are happening elsewhere along the front line, which of course you'll see. In these counterattacks are resulting in some success for the Ukrainians. Well, especially on the Toretsk front. We'll get to that in a moment. But the Ukrainians are launching these counterattacks to try and retake some territory, while the Russian forces are on the defensive and trying to rebuild up their forces again for more offensive action. But for now, Russian forces are still making gains, but they are in general on the defensive, at least for the near future. And when I say near future, I mean like probably like a week. I mean like 2 weeks, maybe. It probably won't be long before Russian forces launch more attack. Maybe not a genuine true offensive, but they will begin obviously attacking soon enough, very soon. So give 2 weeks, maybe 3 or 4, and Russian forces will begin attacks like they were before, like across the whole front line. It won't take them very long, but for now they are resting, and on the defensive somewhat. And right here, Russian forces have attacked and captured this forested area right here inside the town of Zarazone. So again, Russian forces are still wherever they can making small little gains, but they are somewhat on the defensive. But where they can, they are still attacking. Again, here they made a small gain. They captured two tree lines, like a tree line right here, and as part of the tree line right there. Small little gains continue to happen. Further south, Russian forces have made a bigger gain. They captured the entire forested area right here, as well as several tree lines to the south, and secured the town of Yampolivka. That town has been on the front line for a very long time. It is now finally under Russian control after a very long time. Moving on from that to the Bilohorivka front line, Russian forces secured the border between Luhansk and Donetsk Oblast right here on this part of the front line, capturing this forested area right here and the road over here. It is now just a small, mostly gray zone area that is between that the Russian forces still need to capture to complete the capture of the Luhansk Oblast on this part of the front line. Moving on from that towards the Chasiv Yar direction, we have multiple Russian advancements. The biggest one here is here to the south. They've pushed through the forested area here and have approached the town of Stupaki. Further north, they pushed through the residential areas and also captured several buildings up here to the north in Chasiv Yar itself. In central Chasiv Yar, they have captured more ground in the center of the city itself, capturing 2 roads right here and pushing right up towards the center of the city itself. But they did lose some ground here to the far western part of the city, and in the far northwest part of the city, the Ukrainian forces recaptured several roads that were previously captured by the Russian forces. That is all for the Chasiv Yar front line. The big front line where the Ukrainian forces have been seeing some big successes. Russian forces had only just recently finally finished the battle for Toretsk, and but they have lost a lot of ground. Ukrainian forces were able to recapture multiple city blocks and roads, city streets up here to the north, as well as recapturing some sort of storage or high-rise building area up here to the north. That area has been recaptured by the Ukrainians. Further to the south, the Ukrainian forces regained a good chunk of ground in the town of Sherebenivka. They have created a massive gray zone. This is not under Ukrainian control, but it is a massive gray zone that leads all the way deep into the southern part of Toretsk. Ukrainian forces have been able to reach as far as this area right here. However, the Ukrainian forces have not been able to consolidate their position because it's not been like a big push to actually take territory. It's been more like, one vehicle will make like a rapid dash all the way towards this area, drop some troops off, and then they retreat or get surrendered or destroy, something like that. It hasn't been, and they haven't been able to send enough men to actually control this territory. And it's just basically been, one vehicle making a wild dash all the way towards here. The reason why this was able to happen, and also Ukrainian forces made this gain up here. The reason why this is able to happen is that as Russian forces actually took Toretsk and were able to secure, this entire area, were able to secure all of this, was because After they did that, they immediately deprioritized this part of the front line and pulled their forces out of this area. Not all of them, obviously. They left the garrison force behind, but they pulled the majority of their forces away to be sent elsewhere. But as soon as they did that, the Ukrainian forces launched a counteroffensive, which has resulted here. So this is definitely a misstep by the Russians. And it makes sense that the Russian forces are obviously they've just won the Battle of Toretsk, so this part of the front line, this is one of the front lines where the Russian forces are switching to a defensive stance to rest up, resupply, and rebuild their forces for more offensive actions in the near future. But while they're doing that, the Ukrainian forces have launched a counterattack. Ukrainian forces obviously are trying to use this resting period, this period of time where the Russian army is trying to rest up, as an opportunity to launch counterattacks, and this is definitely their most successful front where they have done that. Ukrainian forces have made some pretty significant gains inside of Toretsk, and as far as I know, according to the most recent reports, Russian forces are now actually retreating from this part of Toretsk back to about here. So this whole area might go back under Ukrainian control very soon. The Russian forces are retreating out of this area right here because they are now in danger of an encirclement. So this is definitely good news for Ukraine. But will they be able to keep it up? Most likely not for very long. The Russian forces are redeploying their reserves back to this part of the front line to retake the city again. But for now, even though it is of limited scale, this is a significant gain. This is a significant gain for the Ukrainians, and a successful counterattack at that. It's a successful small-scale counterattack. The Ukrainian forces are obviously, again, they're trying to exploit the Russian resting period and are trying to retake territory wherever they can. Another example is over here. The Ukrainian forces were able to retake the big intersection along the TO 504 highway. They've also pushed through and captured this long tree line right here. They were not able to push the Russian forces out of any of the villages in this area: Baranivka, Vodiane, Berezivka, and Zeleny. The Russian forces still control those, but they were able to push a big wedge between them by pushing along this tree line. Will it last? We are unsure. But for now, it is more good news for the Ukrainians. The Pokrovsk front has been very much so quiet for quite some time at this point. Russian forces have not advanced here, so this is definitely an area where the Russian forces are definitely resting. However, at the same time, they're probably too strong for the Ukrainian forces to actually launch a big counteroffensive. Remember, the Ukrainian forces had regained some territory on this part of the front line right here. Not major, but they did regain some territory right here. Russian forces, but then the Russian forces were able to push them back. And then since then, it has not changed whatsoever. So this area has definitely become a quiet zone. Ukrainian forces did push Russian forces out of Uspinivka. I think Uspinivka is a good example of the Russian forces are simply exhausted after a whole year of offensive actions on this part of the front line. They weren't even able to capture the tiny village of Uspinivka. Russian forces pushed into this village. They made little tiny gains here and there, and then now they've been pushed out. So this Uspinivka is a good example of the Russian forces. Russian forces are simply tired at this point. It's been more than a year of continuous offensive. They've driven all the way from Avdiivka all the way up to here. They're exhausted, and it's time for Russian forces. They definitely need a rest period, and this is a good time for them to rest because it's the mud season. They're heading into the mud season. Russian forces have slowed down, but they have not really stopped completely on the southern Donetsk part of the front line. We have some major gains here by the Russian forces still, though it is slowing down somewhat. Russian forces were able to capture some tree lines and forested area right here. They've also completed the capture of Zaporizhzhia. And they've also completed the capture of Andreevka, and they've also even pushed northwest of that pretty rapidly, capturing several tree lines up here to the north. There's a huge open area with no villages, no nothing, just open tree lines, open fields, all the way from here to here. This whole area could be easy taking for the Russian forces to push through this whole area and split southern Donetsk in half by reaching the next oblast over. So we'll see what happens. Most of the Russian forces are in fact trying to do that. They've already made some pretty big gains beyond Andreevka. Further to the south, they made more gains in the town of Constantinople, as well as making more gains for the forested areas here to the south. And they've made big gains. So there's a small gain right here. They've made big gains on the I can't really call it the Vlykanovo-Suky front. I'll call it the Komar front. On the Komar front, Russian forces have made major gains, capturing capturing 3 villages and securing the town of Novochertuva Tuvate. They've captured Skudne. They've captured Berlatsky. They've captured Privilne, as well as a lot of area in between them. This is obviously a big gain for the Russian forces. They've also captured this little area right there. And they've also captured the town of Novodorivka here in the Zaporizhia region. And they've also made more gains here over here to the west, securing the town of Dorozhenivka. And they've made a small gain over here, pushing into the town of Bielorussia. Russian forces made 3 more small gains over here to the west, capturing some tree lines, and also capturing the town of Piatikatiki. So, things have slowed down pretty much everywhere above the Polk-Rolls front. So starting at the Polk-Rolls front and moving up north, things have slowed down except for maybe in the Kursk region and the Oskil front. Russian forces everywhere else are definitely slowing down. They are resting, they're rebuilding their forces, and the Ukrainians are taking the opportunity to launch counterattacks wherever they can. Their most successful is on the Toretsk part of the front line, where they've made some pretty significant counterattacks. But the Russian forces have continued to be active on the southern Donetsk part of the front line, where they've basically already won at this point. So this part of the front line, they have remained active, as you can see here. That's all for this update. Thank you guys for watching. This is a very big update. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.